I just have an understanding of the life process. From studying the cases of small children who have spontaneous memories of their most immediate former life, and we have hundreds and hundreds of these cases documented by Dr. Ian Stevenson at the University of Virginia, and by studying the various child psychotherapists who work with children and adult psychotherapists who work with adults, and taking people back to the source of their pain and recovering the early trauma and the healing that this produces in their present life. Eventually, we have accumulated enormous evidence for the fact that we reincarnate. We reincarnate many, many times. So then my concern is to say, well, so what? What are the implications for how we live our life and how we understand our life and how we understand our relationships from this understanding that reincarnation is a fact of life? And my understanding is when we die, we return to spirit and to soul and to a larger intelligence, and then we consciously choose the circumstances of our next incarnation, and we get small and focus in experience. And then we die and we expand into the larger arena, and we come back and learn. It's like in college, when you choose your courses, you then focus for the semester. And at the end of the semester, you step back and say, that's over, how nice. And then we choose another round of courses. And by going back and forth, lifetime by lifetime, hundreds of years, thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, we are growing. We are becoming more than we were before. I think it makes an enormous difference. It places all the questions we have about life and all the projects we may undertake in our life and all the relationships we have in our life on a larger perspective. It basically lifts the constriction of time from our understanding of existence. If we have, in fact, tens of thousands of years to accomplish whatever the purpose of life is, it gives us a much larger landscape, a much larger canvas on which to create, on which to understand, first of all, and then on which to create. We understand that we are not simply developing the life process for a few years or a few decades, but we're developing the life process for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years. That naturally invites us to undertake projects which we will not be able to fully accomplish or realize in this lifetime, but we undertake projects which we will see a fruition in lifetimes to come. And it also expands our sense of our connections to other people, because the relationships that we have in this lifetime probably did not begin in this lifetime, but they have an older history. And likewise, the way we treat people in this lifetime will have consequences in a subsequent lifetime. So it just enormously expands the canvas in which we create. I truly think that we don't really understand yet how entering into extreme non-ordinary states of consciousness is impacting our incarnation in this lifetime. If we are dealing with gentle states of non-ordinary states or psychedelic states, if we're dealing with simply staying close to the shoreline of time and space and just unearthing some pain from this life or earlier in our life, we have medical models for how to understand that. If we go deeper to experience the continuity of life across time and the inherent presence of the divine or cosmic intelligence in life, then we still have spiritual models for understanding how these things might work. But when we go very, very deep into the universe, when we go beyond the limits of space, beyond the limits of time, when we immerse ourselves profoundly into the crystalline body of the divine, how these experiences are being assimilated by us when we come back, that I think we're still working out. We're still trying to understand, at least I'm trying to work that out. It has changed my understanding of my life. It's changed my understanding of history. It's changed my understanding of the divine. And when I say the divine, I don't mean the divine within our conventional, historical, culturally embedded concepts of the divine, because those get shattered along the way. It's made me look forward to dying, because I have no fear of what's waiting for me when I die, because I've already been there multiple times, and I look forward to what happens when I die. I think the most challenging aspect of going into these states and coming back is working to stay open so you can use these temporary experiences as seeds to catalyze a deepening of your own life once you are here, once you are back. You can't stay in those states. You can't even recreate those states here. But by entering into those states, they give us seeds of understanding and seeds of experience, and we can nourish those seeds here using traditional spiritual practices, meditation practices, acts of compassion, and so on. So for me, how these experiences have impacted my life are still being worked out. Also, I found that as long as I had to keep silent about these experiences, as long as I could not teach from these experiences, I could not share these experiences, there is a sense in which my integration of those experiences was only partial. Now that I've begun to speak freely about the experiences, now that I've begun to write and teach from these experiences, I find that their integration into my being has deepened. But this is just beginning. After 20 years after I stopped these experiences, only now have I begun to write about them completely and speak about them completely. We'll see where that goes, but I have a sense that it's going someplace. I do not know where it's going to go yet. The messages I take away are: banish fear. The things that we're afraid of are not rooted in reality, that there is a deeper reality in which that dissolves all those fears. The message is to cultivate love and compassion for all beings, because compassion is inherent in the nature of oneness. And the world is ultimately one in its deepest forms, in its deepest roots. All individualized expression of life emerges out of a fundamental oneness. The more we recognize that and live in oneness, the more comfortable we are, the more we embody the values of oneness, the more we are synergistically coupled with the processes of life. Fear comes out of a sense of isolation and an atrophied individuality. A rich, robust individuality relates to the world in compassion and looks to the good of the whole. It's said in some spiritual traditions, everything I do for myself is the source of my pain. Everything I do for others is the source of my freedom and my joy. I think that's true. What we do for others is our liberation, because we are enacting the truth of oneness. And I think one of the other teachings is to have a long-term time horizon, that we are in a process of maturation which will not be concluded in a few decades or a few centuries. Our maturational development takes place over tens of thousands, millions, billions of years. So our relationship with the universe is a dance which will continue for long after this body falls away. Let me narrow the scope a little bit to where I think the human race is going. Because in the work that I did, I was given many, many deep visionary experiences of human evolution, what's happening with the human race right now. And this is a natural outgrowth. When your consciousness, when your individual consciousness shatters, when the shell of your individual mind shatters, and you open into the larger context of mind, you don't simply shoot straight into oneness and become one with totality. But one of the things that happens is that you open into your species mind. You open into the mind of the species. And when you are in that state, naturally you get some insights into the developmental trajectory of that species that you are in that larger sense. And many of my experiences kept returning to this theme in a way that completely surprised me. Where we are going, what's happening. And over and over again, the teaching was, humanity is coming to a time of great awakening. Humanity is coming in time into an explosive, exponential increase in its capacity. But for this to take place, for there to be this tremendous remaking of the human spirit, there must take place a deep purification process, literally kind of a dark night of our collective soul, which is a purification, a confrontation with the shortcomings of everything that we've been doing in history, which has been keeping us small, and a confrontation with our smallness in order to open to this new and emerging greatness of our being. So I think in this century, we are entering into a time of tremendous purification, a time of destructuring, a time of losing control, falling apart. In one of my experiences, I was taken forward in time and was allowed to experience the death and rebirth of humanity at some point in the future. I don't know when, but an organic, long, historically embedded process where I experienced the entire collapse of humanity and entering into what you might call a near-death episode collapse. It seemed like we were going to the point of extinction, a complete breakdown of life and our structures at fundamental levels. But then from that, there took place a tremendous resurgence, a birth process. So I think the historical crisis that we are entering, the global systems crisis which we are entering, which is being driven by a global ecological crisis, this external crisis of a world which is trying to become one and overcome its history of factions, and its history of individualism, history of nationalisms, its history of classism, its history of gender conflict. This crisis that's taking place in the global system is actually synchronistically coordinated with a developmental crisis which is taking place internally. As we are trying to become one planet, I think we are trying to become one soul, so that we carry the history of the planet in our being through our former lives. And so as the planet is trying to become one, I think we are individually trying to become one. And I think the solution ultimately of our planet becoming one integrated whole in a healthy, productive way is actually dependent upon ultimately each of us becoming whole individually. So that I expect that the solution in the end of the global systems crisis will be the birth of what I call the diamond soul, which is the birth of soul consciousness inside time and space. We will wake up. We will wake up and realize we are not just this body. We have a much larger history, and all the experiences of all of those lives come together and fuse. And when they fuse, they just don't become a longer story, but they fuse in an explosion of energy which lifts the entire experience of being alive to a higher register. So I basically think that humanity is coming into labor. We have been in gestation for hundreds of thousands of years. Gestation is long, labor is fast. Labor is very intense and painful, but we are in the process of giving birth, not just to a new culture, to a new economy, but we are in the process of giving birth to a new form of human being, an awakened human being, a being with a much expanded compassion and a much opened mind.